a horrible thing to say, Karen called to him. He needs to understand what he's getting into. This is no kid's game. Hey, I can hear what you're saying, I told them. You're meant to, Dad answered. I did my best to pick up the pace. We passed the Japanese team and other people strung out all over the mountain. Some of them looked just like Faiz and Nikki had before they'd given up and turned around on Killy. Karen came up behind me and spoke quietly. That is what happens when you don't eat right and don't train as hard as we do. An hour above the saddle, we came upon a Russian team. Each of them was wrapped in about 5 layers of clothing. A girl was sitting folded over and holding her head. A man was puking at the side of the trail. It was like a war zone around their leader, who unfortunately was one of the few Russians who spoke English. He got into our faces right away. You do not know what you are doing, he shouted. The weather can change any time. Dad opened his hand, palm up, questioning. You do not have the right shoes for the mountain. You do not show it proper respect, he said. I looked at their massive mountaineering boots with heavy crampons. We were in Salomon trail running shoes and our ultralight Katula crampons. I was a little cold, but my feet felt fine. Good luck on the mountain, Dad said with a crooked smile. After we'd walked on past them, he seemed to be feeling better. At least we're moving. All of that weight is slowing them down. No one traveled as fast and light as we did, but it was still super hard, and every inch of my body was about to revolt. To keep from sitting down and weeping as I'd done on Kilimanjaro, I thought of our guide, Samuel, and his beautiful African voice. You're going at an unbelievable pace. You have shown great respect for the mountain. It wants you to climb it. And then, of Dad's very California voice, time to suck it up and climb, dude. So I did just that. After 6 hours of dragging one heavy foot after the other and thinning air, I was completely done in and swore I couldn't take another step. Then I remembered that Dad was doing all this with a major toothache. Feeling dizzy, I stopped to catch my breath. Focus. This is it, I told myself. Now or never. Pick up your feet and move. Another 100 miserable, exhausting yards, and I was there. I felt the same wave of emotion I'd felt when I reached the summit of Killy. It was an awesome feeling. I was so happy that I fell to the ground, sobbing, We did it! We actually did it! Dad and Karen knelt and hugged me. I'm proud of you, J-Man, Dad said. I am too, Karen said, tears streaming down her cheeks. It had been 10 times harder than I'd expected it to be, but I'd done it. I hadn't given up. The summit air was brutally cold. No matter which way I turned, gusting winds hit me and almost knocked me down. My hair was blowing wildly from under my hood and getting into my eyes as I held up each of our sponsors' flags while Karen took pictures in front of the summit marker, a 3-foot-tall rock with red lines spray painted on it. From the roof of Europe, at 18,510 feet, the views were spectacular. We'd come up from the snowy Russian side and could now look over the Caucasus mountain range into the very lush and green country of Georgia. It was a completely different landscape. Summit moments are brief. They're on the most exposed area of the mountain, and often there are other people nearby waiting to have their own summit experience. I knew there was a lot of work ahead, but thoughts of heading down the mountain to my plate of spaghetti rushed into my head, not to mention thoughts of home, family, and friends. A Spanish guy in his 20s came up carrying a snowboard. He spoke a little bit of English. He had the same question that everyone seemed to ask when they saw me on a mountain. How old are you? I'll be 11 tomorrow. He gave me 2 fist bumps. Congratulations and happy birthday. I was jealous when he took off on his own snowboard. I could have skied this, but without equipment, I'd have to try the next best thing. I'm going to go down in a glissade, I announced. Glissading is sliding on your feet or your butt to descend faster. I'd practiced it at home with my trusty ice axe, but I'd never done it on a big mountain. If it would get me down this mountain quicker, I was ready to give it a try. Dad's big hand grabbed my shoulder. No, you don't. Take a look. See that steep wall on the right? Hit that and you're in deep trouble. I'll use my ice axe and do a self-arrest. Not until you prove you can. He stepped about 20 feet below me and waited in case I screwed up. Come down a short way and then try one. I'd practiced self-arrests at home, but this was a steeper, icier hill. I slid a couple of yards, holding my axe with the pick facing the slope. Then I flipped onto my belly, with my feet pointing downhill and my knees apart so I wouldn't roll from side to side. My crampons were in the air so they wouldn't snag and send me cartwheeling. I tucked my arms in, one hand on top of the axe and the other on the shaft as I dug it into the snow. Then I arched my body to put maximum weight on the axe and my knees and slowed to a stop. It's a dangerous move if you don't know what you're doing, but I did. Way to go, Jordan, Karen shouted. Very impressive, Dad said. Can I glissade now? All right, but not very far, and just watch what you were sliding into. He stayed downhill from me, and Karen stood above to take pictures. I slid on my butt. The hill was bumpy, and it hurt. Good excuse for another self-arrest with my trusty axe. I flipped over in perfect position and slammed the pick into the hill. Come on, keep moving, Dad said. I got back up, slid a few more yards, and did another one. Self-arrests were fun. We'll never get to the bottom if you keep that up, Karen called. I scooted farther on my butt, then asked, Can I do it now? Yes, Jordan, go ahead, Dad agreed. Another self-arrest. The sun was out, no longer cold. I was having an awesome time sliding on my butt, laughing, and using my ice axe all the way down. I loved that thing. A couple of hikers passed us and cheered me on. When we reached our camp at the Pastakova Rocks, again, it was around 1 o'clock. The last tram left at 3. Most people coming down either spend the night here or at that hut we passed, Karen said. They're too exhausted to go on. Another cold night up here makes no sense. What do you say to a serious run down the mountain to catch the tram? Dad smiled and shot a sideways glance at me. There's spaghetti dinner waiting for you at the cafe. It sounded way better to me than hunkering down to a freeze-dried dinner in a cold tent. Let's go for it, I said. We packed everything up and started half running, half sliding down the hill. After the climb and all my self-arrests, I was totally wiped out. Karen kept yelling, Jordan, you've got to keep the pace or we won't make it. I knew not making it meant a 2-hour walk down to the village, and my legs were screaming at me to give them a rest. All I'd eaten since coming off the summit were 2 of Karen's peanut butter cookies, some trail mix, and an energy bar. I was starving, and visions of that spaghetti kicked me into racing mode. Dad ran ahead and surprised me by hailing a snowcat. He talked to the driver, then looked back at Karen and shook his head. The snowcat wouldn't be able to get us there fast enough. He took off even faster toward the tram. Karen and I sprinted after him. We made it to the tram 1 second before it left. We thought we'd paid for our return trip when we'd bought tickets to go up the mountain, and there certainly wasn't time to buy any tickets now. The kid working the tram didn't want to let us on. He kept yelling something in Russian. A girl who spoke a little English leaned out the door. Just go ahead and get in. Who were we to argue? We hopped right on. We're still not sure whether we paid or not. That's the cost of not knowing the local language, I guess. Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. I couldn't wait to get to the hotel and eat the meal Sweetie had promised me. You're back already, she said when we walked in the door. You didn't make the summit. Yeah, we did. Karen showed her a picture of me with a marker. That's impossible, she eyed me. You took the snowcat up? I shook my head. No. We even walked from the tram to the Barrels camp yesterday. And are back here today? Huh, I will tell everyone, she said. Jordan couldn't wait to get back to your spaghetti, Karen said. Sweetie smiled. Then I will have the cook make it for you right now. I folded my arms on the table for a pillow and laid my head on them. How's your tooth, Dad? He ruffled the back of my long curls. Think I'll live until we get home. I could have fallen asleep right there, but I wanted to stay awake for my spaghetti. I pulled up and slumped back against the chair. I ate a salad while waiting for the much-anticipated spaghetti dinner. Sweetie brought it to the table, and it looked exactly like a steaming plate of spaghetti covered in delicious tomato sauce should look. I couldn't wait to dig in. I glanced up at Sweetie and smiled. Thank you so, so much. I've been looking forward to this the entire time. That's good. That's good. I really hope you like it. I will, I assured her. Then I took a bite. The noodles were so overcooked, it was like eating mush. And the tomato sauce tasted more like tomato juice. What do I do with this? I whispered. I can't hurt her feelings. She's being so nice. Karen looked to make sure nobody was watching before she stuck her fork in and stabbed some mushy pasta. We'll help you, right, Paul? Sure, Dad answered. The three of us working, we managed to clean the plate, but I'll never order spaghetti in Russian again. My face felt really hot all through dinner. Dad's and Karen's faces were a deep shade of red, and their cheeks and lips were swollen. When we got back to our room and I looked in the mirror, I saw the same creature glaring back at me. Karen dabbed lotion on my cheeks. Somehow the sunscreen didn't make it into the bag. I don't know why. Too much going on, I guess. Lesson learned. You can't be at this high altitude with the sun reflecting off the snow and avoid getting a humongous sunburn. It won't happen ever again, I promise. Dad chuckled to lighten things up a bit. His tooth was still bothering him, but reaching a lower altitude had definitely helped with the sinus pain. We need to find a sunscreen sponsor. To avoid getting any more sun, I had to wear a scarf over my face and a hat pulled down over my eyes while we hung out there the next 2 days. We visited another little ski area nearby and some of the quaint restaurants. It was incredibly sad to see people waiting in long lines at a truck for basic food provisions. Times were hard there. We took a taxi back to Mineralny Vody and flew to Moscow on that same rickety plane. Unlike the countryside, Moscow was very international. A lot of people spoke English, but it was still hard finding our way around because most of the Russian alphabet isn't anything like ours. The Moscow subway terminals were amazing, with vaulted ceilings, artwork, and musicians playing classical piano and cello. The trains had little tables and curtains like in a James Bond movie. Our fellow passengers wore peacoats and light scarves and looked very stoic and tired at the end of the workday. We visited the tomb of the unknown soldier and watched the changing of the guard. Soldiers marched in unison, swinging their right arms to their chest and lifting their legs parallel to the ground, knees locked. From there, we went to the armory, where we saw 1,000-year-old carriages covered with golds, diamonds, and rubies. Red Square, the central square in Moscow, was enormous. We saw the Kremlin, the famous Russian fortress, along with St. Basil's Cathedral, which is said to rise like a flame from a bonfire toward the sky. There are 8 side churches around the central one, all with those onion-shaped domes that I'd seen in pictures. It has to be one of the most amazing buildings on the planet. Russia was a fascinating place. I wished we could stay 2 more weeks, but even being there for a few days was great. I had just turned 11 2 days before, and I had already climbed the highest mountains on 3 continents and seen wildlife in Africa and in Steve Irwin Zoo, and now I'd visited the Red Square. Climbing Elbrus had been the best birthday present ever. You'd think I'd have been happy with that, and I was, but I was already thinking about climbing my next mountain, and I still had 5 to go. So now, I want you to think about this question. In which ways does Jordan now appreciate Russia? Use specific examples from the chapter. Respond in the answer box on the Google question post.